So as you know, it's the Wealth Zen. We do it every Tuesdays. Normally we have Charmaine Subramani, but we've had amazing guests over the last 2 weeks. Charmaine deals with a bunch of stuff. And he's actually a friend of the show, and he's been here on multiple occasions, not just as a poet, but also has given us amazing advice. He's got a 11-step program that you took us through. Of course, I'm talking about Steve Tsakiris, who is not just a poet and author, but is an actual fact. I think he's a life architect. He'll tell you the other things he goes with, but I actually think you're a life architect. I think you foundationally change the way people think about their lives.
Well, thanks, Sam. It's good to be here again. As always good to be in studio. And thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I think life is an art form, hey? Yeah. And I think we're all artists, and it's about how do we sculpt the best possible life for ourselves and for others. And I'd like to try and play my part in that. I've always been involved in trying to think about what life is all about. How can I make it better for myself and for others?
Because you work through a lot of different disciplines, including sound therapy. You've written books, you put out meditation pieces. There's a lot of work that you actually do in this space.
It is quite diverse, yes. And again, it's part of like the art of life. You need all sorts of angles to make life work, I think.
So one of the things that I said to Steve is I wanted to talk about forgiveness, right? Because I think it's like a simple word, but it's like deeply complicated. How do you reflect on the word forgiveness and its intent?
Yeah, that's an interesting and vast topic, and it's an interesting one to discuss because, well, first of all, I will link it to the other topic that we also said we might speak about, and that's self-love.
Yeah.
It's important to love oneself, and I'll start by saying sometimes we think that self-love is a selfish thing, but actually it's the most selfless thing that we can do in this crazy world that we live in with all the violence, all the atrocities, all the craziness.
Information coming at you 24/7.
Bombarded. And so I think one of the most foundational weapons that we can use in a positive way is the weapon of self-love, because the person that doesn't respect themselves ultimately will not respect others, cannot respect others, and creates chaos. And so that's where in the world of chaos we need forgiveness. So that's where forgiveness comes in, because what is...
So they kind of actually walk hand in hand.
They do. I think they do. I think the one leads into the other. And I mean, forgiveness, well, let's start with what it is not. What is forgiveness not?
Yeah.
It is not saying that it's okay that people do bad to you. It's not saying that you necessarily need to reconcile with the person or with the things that you need to forgive. It's not necessarily that you need to even communicate. Forgiveness, what it is releasing yourself of toxic emotions. Because the toxic emotions that we hold within ourselves, the toxic thoughts and emotions, actually create toxic chemicals in our body. And ultimately, we make ourselves sick. And so forgiveness is actually releasing yourself from toxic emotions. I think that's how I would define it.
So I just want to do a recap on it. Forgiveness is not forgiving the other person, communicating with the other person. Forgiveness is releasing yourself from the toxic thoughts, the toxic patterns in relation to that person.
Yes.
Or in relation to the deed or act or whatever it may be.
Absolutely, because think about it. What you're doing when you're in resentment, in anger, in hatred, it's in your mind, it's in your body, it's in your heart, not the person that you're resenting or hating. They might be having a great time somewhere, and you sitting with the resentment, with the hatred. So, holding on to that kind of stuff is exactly like the old story of drinking poison and hoping the other person will die. The poison is in you. So forgiveness is freeing yourself. It's fundamental.
But some people will go and say, Steve, I don't know how to forgive. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard somebody says, but I do love myself. I don't see the connection between self-love and forgiveness. These two have nothing to do with each other. But as you're articulating it, I get a sense of, in actual fact, there is some resonance to what you're saying.
Yes, it is. It's like you're renting out, you're not even renting out, you're giving free space to somebody else's ideas, thoughts, notions in your head. Because these things are in your head. When you're angry at someone or something, where is that happening? Where is that anger happening? In you. As I said, that other person can be oblivious to you hating them or being resentful.
You're at a yacht somewhere, having a party.
Having a great time. And there you are. And all these chemicals that are produced in your body by these toxic emotions they can make you ill, and we make ourselves ill. And that is not, by definition, it's not an act of self-love.
Yeah.
Self-love means you need to take care of yourself. And so it starts with an awareness, being aware of yourself. We've discussed awareness before in this show.
Yeah,
and it's about being aware of what is going on inside you. Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling resentment? Being aware of the good stuff as well as the negative stuff, and nurturing and watering the good stuff and letting go of the negative stuff. It's easier said than done.
But Steve, I struggle to forgive. So there's somebody sitting in a car saying, I struggle to forgive.
Yeah.
When people know me, and this is just, the other nice one that people say, it's just who I am.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of person that I am.
Yeah, and that's fine. And I'm not a master at forgiveness either. Let me not give that false illusion. I struggle just like everybody else. But I've come to the understanding that holding on to that stuff, it's as simple as I am drinking the poison and hoping that other person is going to get sick, die. It's crazy. And I think change only comes when the pain of staying the same becomes more than the actual fear of changing. And often we fear change. We don't want to forgive the other person because we think that means
they get off.
They get off. It's okay. But it's not them that are getting off. We are getting off. As I said to start off with, forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not saying that what you did to me was right. It's saying, I'm no longer going to allow you in my head. You're not going to have free rent in my head and in my heart.
And I think once you can say that, as you've now said over the last couple of minutes, that's the start of self-love.
Yes.
Okay. But take me back. How do I forgive?
Okay, so it's a couple of steps. It's a process. It's not a thing. It doesn't happen instantaneously. The first thing is to realize what we've been discussing, that by me holding on to my resentment, my anger, my whatever, it's not...
Whether I've asked forgiveness, whether the other person has asked for your forgiveness.
Or not. It doesn't really matter, does it? It's about me, because if the person comes and asks for forgiveness, in a sense, it shows that they are trying to make up for something. They've realized that's easier. What is not easy? Let's take the worst case scenario. Real abuse happens. Terrible things happen in life. Abuse, rape, that kind of stuff. So, I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy. It's a process. The first step of the process is to realize this is toxic for me. I need to free myself, because what is it doing? It's sapping my energy. It's draining me. It's making me feel ill. It's making me feel angry. Do I want to feel angry? Do I want to feel peaceful? So it's an awareness. The second thing is having the intention to really give the best possible thing for myself. Do I want to go through the rest of my life with this intention, with this toxicity, with this stuff? No, I don't. So it's got to get to the point where it's strong enough for me to want to give up that anger and that resentment. And then there's various things that we can do. We can perform rituals, actually. We can write, we can journal, we can get that stuff out of us. We can scream, we can punch into pillows. There's lots of different little techniques, but ultimately it's not a technique, it's a process over time. And over time, each person will find their own way to do that.
When you want to forgive, but the person is still in your space, and the physical, that person physically being in front of you is a trigger. How do we deal with that?
Well,
because some of us are triggered by, whether it's partners, friends, whether it's acts of whatever, we're triggered by those things.
Absolutely. Well, the first question you want to ask yourself is, does this person still belong in my life? Because that's another choice and decision we've got to make. And if the answer is no, then it's obvious what you have to do. You have to remove that person from your life. Sometimes it's not that simple. That person might be your mother, might be your father, might be your child, might be your best friend. They've done something. That gets a little bit trickier. But in the first case, does this person belong in my life? If the answer is no, then the next choice is quite a simple one, actually. It might not be easy to do, but it's a simple understanding. You've got to get that person out of your life. And then if that person still needs to be in your life, is in your life, I think we need to find a way to be able to reconcile, in a sense.
Sometimes, I say we, because you're the one I'm asking on behalf of, not necessarily me going through it, but on behalf of the listeners. But sometimes we're emotionally attached, whether the relationship is good or bad.
Absolutely.
And you can get to a decision and you say, well, I don't need this person in my life. They're toxic. But there's familiarity. There's years and years. And sometimes we're scared of letting go And so we hold on to these things, even
Yes.
though we have this level of resentment when we see this person, and we can't forgive this person.
Absolutely. And again, it comes to that point of, is the pain of being with this person larger than the fear of letting go? Once the pain becomes larger, so for every person, we've got our own limits and our own ability to tolerate up until a point. If that pain becomes larger than the fear of letting go or the need to let go, then that's when you're going to act. And then I'll just throw one other thing in, which is probably the trickiest thing of all. Sometimes the person that we're angry with, that we're resentful with, that we feel a large anger towards is ourself. Now that becomes tricky, because now you can't divorce yourself from yourself. You can't leave from yourself. So there's another type of forgiveness, which is self-forgiveness. Like, say, for example, and I'm classic in this, is that I tend to hold on to mistakes that I've made. And it's a difficult one for me. It's like you make a mistake and then you beat yourself up over that mistake. It's silly, right? I mean, on a logical level, it's silly, but on an emotional level, there's a charge there that says, I can't let go of this thing. I mean, I've got lots of little and big examples in my own life, but when I've come to realize, hey, this is holding me back, this is making me ill, this is tapping my energy, I can't do what I need to do because I'm so angry about this, then I have to find a way to let it go. And as I said, there's simple rituals which you can do, but ultimately it's a longer process.
Yeah. Self-forgiveness, that's an interesting thing. And we do, I agree, as human beings, hold on to mistakes or kind of parts that we've played in those issues. Is there and I don't know if it's a silly question, I'm happy to be rectified by you. Is there a blueprint for self-forgiveness? You've taken us through the acts of forgiveness, but self-forgiveness is, as you said, you can't divorce yourself from yourself. And so it means you're going to have to somehow make peace with stuff. But then at the same time, peace is not good enough. If you don't deal with it, you can't keep on layering, cementing over things.
Right.
Because when you're alone, those things will come to the surface.
Absolutely. That's why that's the difficult one, because wherever you go, there you are. You can't run away from yourself, that's for sure. And I think it's a very profound question, is that, how do we do that? How do we let go? For me, it's a process of, I wish I had a formula. I mean, I really wish I had a formula. I think...
Because then you would be a billionaire.
That's right, absolutely. And I would also be the most peaceful person alive, because then I could forgive myself for everything.
Yeah.
But the first thing is recognizing that thing is there. The first thing is awareness. And last time, actually, you made a point the last time we were on the show, where you said, I want to be that guy. And I want to say, but I am aware. I know I'm sitting in the studio right now, and I know I'm talking to Sam. The awareness that I'm talking about is a deeper form of awareness. It's an awareness of, what am I thinking? What am I feeling at a deep level? And most of us, Sam, the thing is, most of us are unconscious to that because we haven't practiced. We haven't practiced the skill of being self-aware. And so the first step in answer to that question of self-forgiveness is, I've got to be really aware. What am I really angry about within myself? What have I done? What emotions does it bring up? It's self-awareness. And then the next step of the process is to have the intention to, I need to change this because it's actually restricting my life. That, in a way, is what kind of leads to the solution. There isn't really it's kind of like asking the question, I plant a seed, how do I make it grow? Well, you plant a seed, you water it, it will find a way to grow. So awareness and intention are the watering of the seed of self-forgiveness.
Yeah. And it's interesting as you're talking now, neuroscientific studies have shown that reliving anger or hurt activates the same neural pathway as physical pain.
Absolutely. And exactly what I was saying is, like early on, the emotions, the thoughts create chemistry in the body, which can literally make you ill. So you can relive. That's the other reason for forgiving. You are reliving that thing that you don't want to have in your life. You're reliving it again and again, and your body doesn't know the difference between what is happening now and what you're thinking. Your mind, your subconscious mind, is then fed by that, and you create more negative habits by simply reliving the same thing over and over again.
How much of not forgiving has to do with ego? Because the hardest part of forgiveness is not the act itself, it's the surrender of ego. The ego demands justice.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The ego demands justice, but then that's where awareness comes in. Am I the ego, or am I beyond the ego? The ego is part of my personality, and I don't want to get rid of my personality. I don't want to get rid of my ego. But I believe, in my kind of journey in life, I believe that we are far bigger than our ego. We are far bigger than our mind. We create the mind. We are a soul and a spirit. And when we get to that level of awareness, then we've got to understand we almost have to have a conversation with the ego and say, look, I understand you're here and you're here to protect me. Mostly what the ego does is it protects us. And it protects us in ways that are sometimes destructive to us. So we have that conversation with ourselves, with our ego. And you're quite right. I think one of the biggest stumbling blocks of being able to forgive is the ego, because like, you did me bad, man, you know, and I'm not going to let it go. But when I understand that I'm not the ego, I'm beyond the ego, and I want to live peacefully, I want to be able to have energy to create stuff, whether it's in my business or in my family. When I'm unpleasant within myself, when I'm unhappy with myself, I'm going to make it unpleasant for everyone around me. So then I become a toxic element in society. And that's why I said right at the beginning, I think the most important thing that we need in society right now is the ability to love ourselves. Because a person that hates themselves or dislikes themselves or is unhappy with themselves will make other people around them unhappy, create a toxic environment that creates conflict.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important. One of the challenges always when you have these conversations, there's somebody sitting going, yeah, but I'm not that guy.
Yes.
Or, this sounds very esoteric and stuff like that.
Yes.
But the reality is the practicality of not forgiving is that it is insidious. It creeps into every aspect of your life. Before you realize it, it robs you of your joy.
Yes.
Before it dims your light. It you lose your ability to be able to see the shades and the grays, because it's as the data tells us, you are in a constant state of pain.
Yes.
Whether it's conscious or subconscious. So one has to work actively to relieve that. I know from a spiritual perspective. At some point you even spend time in a monastery, not talking, trying to connect with yourself. And this was in France. If you think of spiritual tradition, and especially if you view forgiveness as sacred, because it mirrors the divine capacity to transform suffering into compassion. So, for example, in Christianity, the central commandment is forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. In Buddhism, forgiveness is tied to the release from karma. It cuts the cycle of reaction. In African philosophy, particularly Ubuntu, forgiveness restores humanity. Just reflect for me on that.
It makes sense in every sense of the way. And that's kind of been my path, is I've studied all sorts of traditions, whether they are spiritual or scientific. I've taken everything in. And what I find is that when various different, sometimes they seem like opposing systems, when they are saying the same thing, there's a truth there. And all of those things that you've quoted are saying the same thing. It's like you really do need to let go of this stuff. You really do need to forgive. It is not only for yourself, but it is for everybody else. It's a kind of a holistic way of living. You don't want to be going through life with pain. And if you choose to hold on to it, that is your prerogative. I mean, you are responsible for yourself. So nobody can make you forgive. But I mean, look at the miracle of South Africa with Nelson Mandela. That's a classic example. He had every reason not to forgive. But he did. And how did that pan out for us? And how would it have panned out if he had been different?
If he wasn't able to let go.
If he wasn't able to let
If
go.
he wasn't able to bridge. If he wasn't able to see far beyond the pain.
That's right.
As we wrap up, and I love this. You set the stone right at the beginning that forgiveness equals self-love, and so by delving on the one, it creates a pathway to the other. But I want you just to reflect as a final thought. It does take courage. You have to be brave.
It takes tremendous courage. It takes tremendous courage because you're going to go through some pain. You are going to go through some pain. And I want to add something else. Anger is an emotion which mostly is there to mask pain. It's like the ability to feel anger is easier than to feel the actual pain. And that's why we sometimes hold on to stuff. But you're quite right, it takes courage.
What is your final advice to somebody who is struggling to forgive? and who's listening to this conversation right now?
Well, I would first of all want to say to them, I know it's not an easy thing. It's not something that you can just get up in the morning and just do, but you need to be able to look, reflect within yourself and realize that it is a tremendous act of self-love to be able to release yourself from toxicity, to allow yourself to be able to be joyful, loving, compassionate. It's far better to feel that way than to feel anger and resentment. And I can't tell them when or where to do it. They need to decide for themselves. They need to come to that understanding that what they're doing is they're harming themselves and those that they love.
Steve, always a pleasure. Your wisdom is profound. Where can people get hold of you?
My website, www.stevetsakiris.com.
As simple as that. Really love your insights, really appreciate it, and hopefully there's a nugget of wisdom that somebody can take out of it.
I hope so. Thanks for having me here. And also shout out to Charmaine. I hope she's doing well.